Welcome to another edition of A Strange New Pod. I'm your captain and host, Julian Brown, alongside the best bridge crew in the quadrant, the Borg Queen of Puns, Ensign Brittany, John Luke's Mirror Universe counterpart, Lieutenant Hawk, and the new host of Survivor Ryza, after the previous host was abducted by some unruly Ferengi, Ensign Aaron. Rear Admiral Eric is celebrating Canada Day, going to see some fireworks with the kiddos, so we will see him back next week. Glory to you and your houses. How are you guys?
Good. What's up, guys? It's been a while.
Yeah, I know.
I'm just in love with my background right now. Cardassian, Cardassian. Know the difference. Your life may depend on it.
They look the same.
I'm going to share a great story about the name of our episode tonight, which is called Keeping Up with the Cardassians. And the reason I bring this up is because I've this week been saying the word Cardassian so much that the targeted advertising on my phone gave the Strange New Pod Twitter account an ad for Entertainment Network and the Khloe Kardashian show. So targeted advertising, ladies and gentlemen. This is not a Cardassian, or sorry, you can't even say it right now. Kardashian show. If you're looking for that, that's on the Entertainment Network. This is a Star Trek podcast, and we're going to be talking about the Cardassians.
But has anyone ever in this group actually seen Keeping Up with the Kardashians? I have not.
No.
I haven't.
Why? Why would any know?
I don't know. I was just curious.
I'm yucking people's yums.
Who has the Cardacity for that?
Listen, we all have garbage trash shows we watch. I'm not going to hate on anybody, but it's not in my, repertoire.
There's better garbage trash.
Do I watch garbage shows?
Watch Below Decks. That show's fun and trashy.
Wait,
I don't think I watch any reality quote TV.
What's one garbage show you watch?
Oh God, I watch a lot of garbage shows.
I watch Bar Rescue. That's my garbage.
I love Bar
show.
Rescue.
Yeah, it's great.
I don't know if this counts, but Impractical Jokers, I love that show.
Oh, I've seen that before.
I don't think that's garbage though. I think that's okay.
No, it's not.
Okay. How about you, Hawk?
Anyway, that's our Strange New Loop today.
Yeah, right.
I'm trying to think of some garbage show I watched.
I'm sure there's something I watch, but I like rewatch X-Files, and like specific shows all the time, but they're like high quality fucking shows. There's some bad episodes of X-Files, but
no, this is more in the reality TV, peeping into some lives that aren't ours and that. I don't know. I guess the closest thing I get is probably the true crime stuff.
That stuff's not trash though.
It's a lot of it is trash.
Okay,
that's true.
Really bad at their job, then it can be trash.
That's true. That's true.
If they dumped a dead body in a trash bag, it's actually trash.
Talix on Twitch says Legends of Tomorrow, to which I say that is not trash.
That's not trash.
The first few seasons of that show are very good. Yeah, it's supposed to be camp. It's a good show.
That is high quality garbage.
Yeah.
Anyway, folks, as always, a big thank you to Sam Dillard, Samo Studios, for our awesome intro and outro music, and to our Twitch collective, who is already very, very lively tonight. It's wonderful. We love seeing you guys. Keep those questions and comments coming all night long. Thanks for joining us on Subspace, as always. So, as we've already previously mentioned, this week, we've had a few run-ins, right, with some Galore class vessels along the border, but we finally made it into the next entry of our Best of Species series, and we're going to turn our focus over to Chloe Kim. No, I'm kidding. To Gul Madred, Gul Dukat. Well, Dukat will be the next one, but we'll talk about Dukat's cousin, unofficial cousin, but we will be talking about him. So this week specifically is going to focus on the introduction of the Cardassians, namely in Star Trek The Next Generation. This is going to be a 2-part episode, so probably sometime in August we'll continue the Cardassian conversation as we delve into Deep Space Nine, because that's their show, right? But we're going to stick with TNG here. But before we do that, Aaron,
yes,
how could people get awesome to some more awesome bonus podcasts and other things like stickers, pins, like our crazy wild Triple Chase episode where we talked about the Enterprise finale, things like that?
Oh man, well, you can join our Patreon where you can see me and Julian get super drunk and talk about funny Star Trek episodes. You can get a pin, which is quarterly, and we just did one that was really cool. It's a little Enterprise on a black star field. That one's super cool. And we did a Pride one, and it's like a teeny little Delta, and it's so beautiful. you will get access to a special part of our Discord where you will be able to chat with us with Patreon only people. So there's lots of benefits. Ooh, Julian's showing the pins right now. They are beautiful. Let's see that again, Julian. I didn't get to see it.
Okay, there it is.
See those pins, everybody.
Pride pin. Yeah,
Julian
it's
is
awesome.
showing it right now.
All designed by the awesome Eric.
Ship pins.
Amazing designs. And so if you join us on our Patreon, that's another way you can help support us. We have a $1, $2, $5, and $10 level. And you can also just join us on Discord. It doesn't cost anything. We do watch-alongs. We did one right before this episode. And just be a part of the community. Twitter, Instagram, anywhere you like.
Twitter's hopping right now with that Janeway meme.
We also have a meme section in our Discord.
Oh, the meme section is so good.
That place is fire. That's where all the lower decks hang out.
That's where our trash heap is.
Yeah, exactly. Brittany, we have a hefty amount of amazing patron collective members already that we have to thank. And who are they?
Well, we have more than 4 of them.
Ooh.
So it's just going to take me a little bit. I'd like to give a special thanks shout out to Simon Stager, Jeff Reeve, Mariah Gossett, Anne Bradley, Spotted Giraffe, Rob, Jen Stein, Tina Alexander, Noe Santos, Kang Hui, JD, Takako Nagumo, Kara Kennedy, Mark, Dana Pearson, Fernanda Nogales, and SMK.
Woo!
Thank you, patrons.
I loved SMK just coming into the watch party last night.
Sounds like a WWE SmackDown.
Yeah, it is. It is. I don't think I have the bell on here anymore. I really like that bell, but alas, I don't have it.
SMK gives them the people's elbow.
Ba-dunk. So, Spotted Giraffe is saying, oh yeah, we do need Pyro Italics. I completely agree. Pyro next episode. If that is it for our patron plug, which you hear every week, but we want you to join our patron because when we get to 25 patrons, we should have been able to do it on our patron episode, but we didn't get to do it. We will sing the best rousing rendition you have
I'm sorry, guys.
ever heard.
You don't want to hear me sing.
Of Faith of the Heart.
We do.
Yeah, Aaron will be like, I have the flu.
You guys know I
background person.
I was a percussionist for a long time. I'll play some music or something.
Right, Eric can play the guitar. You can percuss it up. I want to be the background, like I got faith. You know, it'd be great.
Get a vibraphone out here.
All right, guys, it is time for the Strange New Loop. And with the announcement of a new Star Trek Picard novel that will focus on Raffi being written by one of our guests and friends of the show, Dr. Una McCormick. We can't wait to have her on again to talk about that because it'll be another great book.
Is it called The Raffi of Khan? No? Okay. We tried.
Shut up!
With the announcement of a new Star Trek novel that will feature Raffi, which character from the Star Trek universe that you think deserves more love would you write a book on, and what would be the subject matter?
I already have thoughts.
Aaron, go ahead. You raised your hand first.
I would do a book on Mariner all about what happened. How did she get that demotion? I want to know what happened.
I agree. That would be a great book.
Yeah.
Next season of Lower Decks.
Yeah, probably.
Episode.
Be a different direction for a Star Trek book, focusing more on comedy than on plot.
Yeah, how would you write?
It was autobiographical too. Oh my god.
Oh, her writing it? That would be
amazing.
The shit.
Ooh, that would be
whole
a
section.
book.
So it's just like confidential, like
what's that line, Brittany?
Where it's all logs.
Oh man, this is a moment, man. This is a mood.
Yeah. Ooh, this is a moment, man. Ooh, this is a mood.
The personal logs of Ensign Mariner.
Honestly, I'd keep that under my pillow. Like that would be my Bible.
Yeah, I wouldn't read those. I don't know. I'd be scarred for life.
Yeah.
Blessed.
Yeah.
Tawny, teach us your ways.
Brittany Hawk.
So I was thinking about this, and initially I was like, you know what? Harry Kim deserves it. But then I took a second and I was like, but if they wrote a book about Quark, I'd be all fucking over that. You know what I mean? Because like you're thinking it's got to be like one of the main cast, like these different Starfleet officers. We always want to know everything about them. But then I'm also like, how funny would it be to have a book about Quark?
I'd read
There's
it.
got to be so many stories in his past and that,
Right.
you know.
It would be chapter 1 extortion, chapter 2 bartending, like chapter 3
it's
my
just the
bromance
rules of
with Odo,
acquisition
like
and how
just
they apply to him.
Chapter 4 to my Moogie.
Yeah, instead of appendices, it would be like different lobes.
But not just that. I mean, like as far as a Ferengi go in that, he's like he is probably the most brilliant character among their species.
He's interesting,
right? He's gotten
he would
himself
have,
out
like,
of
a forward that's like to Nog and Rom, you know. It's like Nog, the best of us, who joined Starfleet, but Rom, my idiot brother.
No. This would be it. To Nog and Rom, you still can't have the bar.
Yep.
I want my cut.
Where's my latinum?
But yeah, I in my heart I was like, Harry Kim should have a book, but then I was like, but my broke brain was like, Quark.
You should have a promotion first.
To Rom and Nog, whatever happened to those self-stealing sembolts?
Oh my god, the self-stealing sembolts. Amazing.
Ugh.
I never learned.
Nope.
I was trying to think of one in that, but then again, I have a really bad knowledge regarding the novels in the Star Trek series, and that. So you know, if I think of somebody, there's a good chance that there's already a novel written about him.
Because you already are the encyclopedia, so you're just like, well, I have indices on all these people.
Yeah, Hawk is literally sitting on my couch right now.
Right?
Yeah, right.
It's a joke because I busted out my Star Trek encyclopedia for something yesterday.
Then I was thinking maybe there has probably never been a Wesley Crusher book that followed him after he left the Enterprise and that and started his journey with the Traveler.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my god, you're telling me he has a travel blog? I can't wait to read.
Yeah, he's actually the one who started
Traveler.
He's the one who started Travago.
He has his own YouTube series.
That. You're right, Hawk. That's good.
That is a good one.
Hey guys, I'm here in the third dimension. It's awesome. Look at the beautiful swirls of colors. There's no oxygen. I love it. Like
he's like, no rules, no Starfleet. Fuck those guys. Love to see it.
No living with my mom on the ship anymore.
No quarters, Mom.
Her over there. I know. He'd probably go back. He'd probably go back at some point to see his dad.
Yeah, that'd be sad. Before I go, I'm going to go over some of these on Twitch. And it's funny, Jay, one of our awesome Patron Collective members, went kind of the direction that I'm going to go. But he says Thomas Riker escaping from the Cardassian prisons, which I would just die for. That's a yes, 100%. I am totally down. I want that book. And then Spotted Giraffe with another one. This pertains to the last episode we literally watched before we started the podcast tonight. What happened to Row? Because we know that she joins the Maquis at the end of Preemptive Strike. We know that sometime during DS9, all the Maquis get wiped out by the Dominion.
How Row can you go?
Bad shit.
There would be really good titles for these books, by the way.
So, for me, because he's my favorite character, man, I want a Will Riker Starfleet Academy early days books, because dude, he's got to have some wild stories, right? Like it would be a list of his like sexcapades, right? It would just be like, alien from Rigel 4. I want to read his
Julian have his fanfic, damn it.
Of Riker. It's like the dirty fan fiction. Okay.
Yeah, I want that book. Yeah. No.
And then towards the end, he like raises Mariner to be just like him, and you're like, well done, sir.
Exactly. Yeah, because Chadiches, got to be my Chadich.
Chadich their own.
Chadich.
Yep. So, here we go. Let's get into this one, because we have been trying to do this episode for close to a month. And Hawk, I'm gonna hand the con over to you. You're gonna give us a brief history of the Cardassians.
So briefly, I think they're encapsulated by Edward Jellicoe's quote from Chain of Command Part 1. Cardassians are like timber wolves, predators, bold in large numbers, cautious by themselves, and with an instinctive need to establish a dominant position in any social gathering. I think that pretty much sums them up well.
100%.
They were introduced a little late in the series and that, and as a like a main villain in that, and we've always made these comparisons between like the main villains in any Star Trek to like what's going on in the real world. Do they kind of seem like the Russians or North Korea at the time when they were written? At least that's according to, I'm just going on the information you give us here.
Yeah.
Mainly, we tend to look at the Cardassians as Nazi Germany of Star Trek, given the occupation of Bajor, with the forced labor there, destruction of cultures, slavery, genocide, and that. And it's an apt comparison in that, Germany rising out of the defeat in World War I, very poor, impoverished in that, and turning military control over to the government, which elevated it for a while, but ultimately, led to all the atrocities that we see in this series. So at the time the Cardassians were introduced, the Federation was still recovering from the decimation of their fleet in the fight against the Borg. And while they were still technologically inferior to the Federation on that, they didn't want to risk another war with Cardassia in this weakened state.
Yeah, as far as comparisons to Russia, North Korea, like I always feel like the Cardassians, more than anything, like 95%, it was so obvious, right, that it was just Nazi propaganda, like Nazi Germany. I think Ron Moore said it in a quote, like from time to time they could fill that Russian North Korea kind of role if they needed to in an episode. But I mean, listen, slavery, genocide, resources, the decimation of a culture, right, of the Bajoran people. It's very much what the the Nazis did to the Jews in the 30s and 40s.
Yeah, but the way they try to legitimize it, like, we were poor, we were starving, and that now our children have full bellies, and that's because of the military.
Yep. I didn't know if you wanted to keep going doing the occupation of Bajor as well, because that's part of their history. It's up to you, or if someone else wanted to take that, but otherwise it's yours.
So the Cardassian control over Bajor was asserted from 2319, establishing the Bajoran occupational government. The Bajoran people were initially offered little resistance, but after the Cardassians rapidly pacified the plan and began to coordinate a scheme of strip mining, forced labor, slavery, and that, the people resisted. Obviously, we'll be touching on this a lot more when we head over to DS9, but the brutality of the Cardassian military drove many in the previously mollified Bajoran populace to form a ferocious resistance, operating on granola.
I had granola. They had so much energy.
So much.
They had a Clif Bar.
Operating on guerrilla and terrorist tactics, the resistance constantly harried Cardassian forces. Under constant attack by the Bajoran resistance and unable to subdue them, facing pressure from both internal civilian elements in the Cardassian Central Command and from the United Federation of Planets, the Cardassians withdrew from Bajor in 2369.
Indeed, they did. And before we get into the kind of topics that we've laid out, the Cardassian Federation Wars, also known as the Border Wars, the future armistice, I just want to kind of get your guys' takes on the introduction, right, of the Cardassians and what they were doing with Bajor. We get a lot more detail, obviously, about it in DS9, but we get the first kind of inklings of who the Cardassians are and what they're doing. Like, how did you guys feel, not only watching these episodes today, but the first time that you watched anything Cardassian, and how this did mirror, Nazi Germany, basically?
Cardassians for me are like scary in the fact that they're so based on reality. So there's a lot of times, Klingons are enemies now, Romulans are enemies now. And there's a lot of that with it being fiction that you can also say, okay, but this is sci-fi. It touches on some things, but I know, like, I'm not going to run into a Romulan tomorrow, per se. But then, like, you see how the Cardassians are, and the fact that it's, like, right after their war has ended, and it's this whole, like, tensions could happen, these things could start again, and you're like, I know this historically. I know what happens. Like, it's scary. I don't want this to continue to happen. So anytime they're on screen, whether it's TNG or DS9, you're just like, oh shit, I hope things go okay. Like, and it sucks because you're like, is this gonna be learning about something they did, or are we worried they're starting something else? And the whole TNG thing, the fact that it's like hovering over whether or not they're going to do this treaty or start war back up again, you're just like on the edge of your seat anytime you see a Cardassian. You're like, oh shit. That's how I feel.
Yeah, they don't ever slip into that sort of thing where like the Klingons are, we're warriors, blah blah blah, but they definitely have a little bit of a cartoony side to them
Yeah, for
sometimes.
sure.
And I think that's one of the things they did really well with the Cardassians that I think is hard to do, especially in a long-running series, which is to keep them scary, or if not scary, there's a sort of sinister vibe to them that doesn't ever really feel lost. I think what's his face from DS9 who does all the clothes?
Oh, Garrick.
Yeah,
You mean the
Garrick.
simple tailor?
Yeah, he's the one who gets the closest to that, but he still has that sinister under vibe to him. But in general, they keep that tension the whole time, and I think that lends a certain credibility to the stories they play with the Cardassians. Especially, the one we're going to talk about with Picard and the torture and everything. So that's my feeling.
Yeah. As far as like a major villain in that, there was so much more they could play with the Cardassians in the story writing of that, because the Romulans were always felt very removed from, the series and that, because of the neutral zone and that. Whenever they called them out, there was, something dire was going on, for them to break the treaty with the new with the Romulans. The Cardassians always felt like an enemy that they had to try and get along with, because their borders kind of, were so close to the Federation's territory. And it led to some amazing like Cold War spy intrigue in the writing of their characters, which always kind of kept me coming back to them.
And it's interesting, right? Because we talk about how much the Cardassians resemble Nazi Germany, but in that, what you just mentioned with the like kind of turning a blind eye to things and letting them kind of get away with, things that probably are breaking the treaty, but we're going to let's like, because we both don't have the capacity to go to war. So it is very much like, the Russia and the US and the Cold War in that specific situation. It's very interesting. For me, I mean, listen, like I grew up watching Star Trek when it was on TV, and I was watching it, but I feel like as a kid I was always watching episodes out of order, either because of syndication, what my dad was taping for me, etc. So my first real introduction to the Cardassians, I believe, was in DS9. Like I went back, or I missed episodes of TNG and had to watch them later. But what I found interesting recently is after she suggested it and so many people in our Discord collective talking about it, I downloaded the audiobook of the autobiography of Catherine Janeway, which is narrated by Kate Mulgrew herself. And what's interesting about that book, even as kids and even when Janeway's young, the war is something that people are hearing about. And listen, Janeway, much like Jean-Luc, is from a small town, right? They don't get all the news, but luckily her father's a very prominent admiral in Starfleet, so she's getting all this information firsthand. And her mother is writing books about the Bajoran occupation, children's books about Bajorans and their occupation. And it was just like, we don't get to ever see the border wars on television, but like it's such an important part about Federation history. And kind of like all the backstory we're getting from books now and what we got in DS9, I mean, as evil as they are, I think that they're probably one of the like top 3 like most fascinating species in the Star Trek universe. So I yeah. Yep. If you haven't downloaded that, by the way, do it, because
so good.
It's so good. Again, written by Dr. Una McCormick. I'm going to read NY Relics comment on here real quick. Starfleet not curb stomping the Cardassians during the border wars.
Oh my
gosh. Shows to me how weak military they had gotten by TNG. If not for Q's wake up call with the Borg, the Dominion would have rolled over the Federation. Actually, it's interesting. Rob brought up a good point about this, and he's right. By the time the Dominion come, and this is getting into DS9 territory again, but by the time they come, Starfleet is not ready to handle a long sustained war because of the Borg and Wolf 359. I think I forget, it's an episode, by the grace of the prophets, I think they closed the wormhole with Starfleet able to survive early in the war. So yeah, great point though. Erin, do you want to start us off, please? Unless it sounds like you might want to say something real quick.
No, I'm good.
No, you're good. So we're going to go into the Federation Cardassian Wars, also known as the Border Wars, and then the future armistice between the Cardassians and the Federation.
Yep, border wars and Cardassian wars, lots of stuff going on. The conflict started as far back as 2347 and lasted well into the 2350s, with smaller skirmishes not officially considered part of the wars, which continued into the 2360s. So like any war, you know, all the stuff in the world we've been dealing with, that it feels like it's never ending, right? It's not like, you know, World War II's over, let's sign the paper, everybody go home. The ensuing stalemate by the mid 2360s, it didn't give anybody the advantage on either side in firepower or territory. And in 2366, a truce, and in 2367, the armistice enforced an end to the hostilities, but left key questions unresolved. The finalized treaty, unsigned until 2370, formed a demilitarized zone, which we all know about, between everybody, which was the focus of a lot of episodes.
A lot of episodes. And yeah, one of the major reasons the Maquis exist, which we'll obviously get to.
Yeah. Oh, I love the Maquis. We know from all three TNG era series, and now in a bit more detail from the autobiography, which we were just talking about from Janeway, that this was a really big conflict. And with officers we know about, Captain Picard, O'Brien, Janeway, Lieutenant Janeway. By the way, let's do that book.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, they all saw some action in the border wars. And for some of the officers involved in the war, it led to, you know, racism. We see that a lot with O'Brien. And
we even see it, you know, a little bit with you know, it's gonna happen no matter what we try to avoid it. We're gonna end up talking about DS9 a little bit here. You know, even, you know, Bashir is a little bit like hesitant of Garrick and a little bit racist towards him in the early days of DS9.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that and especially as someone who grew up as a military kid, and, you know, all of us who just grew up, like, that sort of propaganda is taught to people, you know, to help the war effort and, you know, to create nationalism and things like that. And not that Starfleet is trying to do that, but I think when you're in a conflict and you're fighting someone, it's hard not to, you know, create a bias, especially if people are dying around you. And we see a lot of that in the episode The Wounded, and O'Brien and his relationship with his former CO Maxwell, and how much they both, you know, dislike the Cardassians because of all the death they saw.
Yeah.
Yeah, what did you guys think about that? Like, that episode really, I feel like that's one of the best TNG episodes. It really, because there's a lot of conflicted feelings. I think that O'Brien is really self-reflective in this, which I think is actually a really positive thing, because I think a lot of people hate and then they never stop hating. So I think the capacity to even try to change your mind is a big deal.
Yeah, the standout thing for me in that episode is the fact that when O'Brien's talking to anybody else about the Cardassians, he keeps saying, well, the war's over. Like, people shouldn't continue these hostilities. But even when his wife, you know, asked him, like, but how do you really feel about it? She's, like, kind of making him start to reflect on that. And it's so interesting because there's, you know, a lot of things in the world we think are black and white, and things, you know, morally, it's like, well, this should be a no-brainer. Morally, we should do this. But things are complicated, and people that are in the actual situations where these things are happening have different experiences that can sometimes cause them to take a longer time to let go of things that have happened if they ever want to, and you can't really say morally if they should or should not. It's very messy. So to see O'Brien have that sort of like focus on an episode that's about something he went through that people, like everybody else on the ship, hasn't dealt with, unless they knew somebody, like if they had somebody they knew that was Bajoran was occupied, or they actively fought in the war. So for me, it's so cool to see O'Brien actually have that spotlight and to be that person that's like, this is how it should be. But he's showing himself that it's really hard to be this way. And we have to work really hard to reach what even I think is what we should be. So.
He has that great line in the episode, right, where he goes, I don't hate you, Cardassian. I hate what you've made me become. And
exactly.
That is, I mean, that says it all right there. Yeah, that's just a fantastic line.
And that's when they knew they had to put O'Brien on the new show.
Yeah, right.
They're like, O'Brien, conflicting feelings about Cardassians.
I think Rob made an offhanded comment, something like, and that's when people figured out why, like, the best actor on the series, why he was just stuck in the transporter room the whole time. Because Colm Meaney, like, listen, as far as actors go, like, he's a top tier actor and barely got to see him. But
like 90s Colm Meaney and that, like, you know, beyond Star Trek, it afforded him a lot of luxury to go on and do these little independent projects, mostly based in Ireland, and that, you know, like The Commitments and that. There was this film he was the lead in that called The Snapper. It's this comedy in that about an Irish father and that his teenage daughter, you know, becomes pregnant, and you know, he's, you know, he kind of transforms his whole kind of viewpoint in that, you know, based around this. It's yeah, if you can find it, it's got to be out there somewhere on iTunes and that. So if you want to see it. I love this episode. It was my first introduction to the Cardassians way back when, and that, and it's such a weird way of introducing a major villain in that, because they didn't seem like the villain when the episode starts, right? There's something a little sinister about them. There's something happening in the backgrounds, you know. The guy who got caught near the comm device and that,
yeah,
and then the Gull, you know, just rips him a new one.
Yeah.
But yeah, you know, and the conversation between him and Miles, in the bar is fantastic, because you can see, like, you know, even on their side, they're not just like this homogenous, you know, uniform thinking people in that, you know, they're people who are conscripted and they hate war too, and that, you know, because it just takes them away from their families. It makes them do things they don't want to do either. But then that final bit at the end, right,
with Jean-Luc, and he's like,
you
know, we do know what
you're doing back there.
And that is what I particularly love about this episode, and what me, Aaron, and Rob are having a very friendly argument on our Discord about earlier. Like, it's an interesting look at an officer who does have to abide by rules and regulations and orders, taking the law basically into his own hands with intel that, you know, we all do know ends up being good. But the question is what he did wrong if what we now know to be true was in fact true? You know, because this leads to so much just sitting on the sidelines and you know, basically sitting on your hands by Starfleet. Like, Maxwell, I think, had good intentions. I feel like, you know, in the episode they call him crazy. I think, Aaron, you called him crazy. Is he actually crazy though? Because, you know,
crazy is the wrong word. I just threw that word out there.
You mean like overzealous, maybe?
Yeah,
definitely.
How he acts.
Okay, I don't, you know, we don't, and it was a really friendly conversation.
It was great.
Like,
I was just supporting you by saying, like, that's probably what you meant to say.
Yeah.
By it. Because he lost his wife and his kid, right?
Lost his whole family.
Yeah. So he, I call this, I was saying earlier, this is the Killmonger situation, because what he's right about the fact that they are doing bad things, but the way he went about it is wrong, because he could have taken that information, gotten solid information, and found a way to make it work with Starfleet, but he just basically threw an explosion at it and to force their hand, and now Starfleet's not ready to deal with that, and so he's just putting everybody off on the wrong foot. And I think that, and it's a result of his trauma, right? Like, we were talking about trauma. He has a lot of trauma. And I think it's just a non-winnable situation for him.
Yeah, that's fair.
Oh, guys, I love these little discussions.
Trauma wounds all.
I will just say, though, I do appreciate, and I know there was a little bit of a back and forth about this too. I do, at the end of the day, appreciate that Jean-Luc gave him the courtesy of, like, being able to stay on his ship. I know that you're like, oh, we should have just been, like, thrown in the brig at that point. But I'm like, I don't know. Listen, what I will say, like, if his intel ended up actually been wrong and he was just killing innocent Cardassians, then yeah, like, throw his ass in the brig. But from this episode on, we learn that the Cardassians are rearming for war. It doesn't come for a couple of years, but it does come.
He still went above his authority. I think what they should have done was let him go back to the ship, but in more of a like put the first
officer in command,
because what they did was they endangered all those people on the other ship. Like, Julian, I hear what you're saying, but I think that they endangered a lot of people for optics.
But
to spare his feelings.
Well, but dude, and we're gonna get into that so much, right? So much of what Starfleet did during these few years leading to DS9 and then later the wars was so much about optics.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Oh, politics.
And that's what makes DS9 so fun.
Yeah.
Because then they deal with all the fucking consequences.
Well, speaking of somebody who should have been on DS9 but wasn't, the episode. Yes. Damn it! You should have been on that show, Brittany. How?
Right, as a baby.
A baby on that show. That'd have been so cute.
Little Bajorn baby.
Aww.
I'd watch it.
I probably would have been killed or something. Let's be honest.
Oh God, that'd be terrible.
Oh.
No. You guys know the episode Ensign Row? I think everybody loves Ensign Row.
Yep.
So that's our introduction to her as a character. And we learn in the episode that the Cardassians are trying to manipulate Starfleet admirals into helping them get rid of the Bajorian resistance, because they know that Starfleet doesn't want to break this ceasefire. Like we were just saying, they're in a bad position, and so they can't see that they're being manipulated. And I think that that's it's such a good story to tell, and it's nuanced. And I think we see a lot of that in the real world, where people do things because they don't want the bad thing to happen, even though the thing they're doing is pretty bad.
Yeah.
So what did you guys think of Starfleet looking the other way? And that Admiral was just like, yeah, go kill those Bajorans on the ship, whatever, for just to keep the peace. What did you guys think about that?
I love when Star Trek does things like this, as sometimes the episodes that hurt the most to watch, or like things that are so like terrible, end up being the best episodes because they bring to light these issues. So the Cardassians are so smart in that they are picking those admirals that have these biases and these prejudices because of the whole war. So finding people that they can manipulate so easily to be like, I'm going to give you what you want. You're not necessarily with us, but you doing what you want helps us. And the fact that they get people who are so like, they give their hearts to Starfleet to actually help them against the Bajorans, it's really fucked up when you think about it, because Starfleet also sat out. When all these things were happening to the Bajorans, they sat out because they have these rules and regulations. They stand for these ideals. And I know, as much as we point out the fact that, some of the decisions they make, like, why would you let this admiral do this? Why would you let this person do this? They went above the chain of command. There's amazing Star Trek episodes where Jean-Luc disobeys the rules. Kirk disobeys the rules to get the job done. And then they have to answer for it later. So sometimes in the moment, they have to determine, like, what the good moral choice is or not. And, man, so many of these Cardassian episodes are about that. Like, it's such a struggle. And that's how you can have such a contained episode where, like, you're not going all over the quadrant trying to solve things, but you're just like, this is a problem. This is our own people doing this to people that we now are supposed to be protecting because we didn't back when it mattered. And it's like, holy shit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So 100%.
I don't know what else to say. It's just like,
like in real life, like ceasefires all the time. You think it's great when you read in history books, like, oh, they made a treaty, the war ended. But then you learn later on, you're just like, oh, but these civilians kept being killed. Nothing changed here. 50 years later, these kids are now being conscripted to become terrorists against us because, once again, we provided nothing for them. So you realize that all these things have consequences and are so cyclical. And it's like, you can't pinpoint the end to wars. They can tell you in a textbook that this war lasted 5 years. But for somebody, those 5 years might have been their whole life.
Right.
And it's like, damn, it's a ripple for generations, and that's Star Trek's beauty. It's tragic sometimes.
I'm trying to think what to add to this.
I'm sorry, I kind of ranted.
I don't know. She just chef's kissed it.
I love she really so much, and I get so emotional about, like, I don't know. Kardashians stress me out.
That's why we have a podcast, because we care.
Yeah.
Like, keep the peace in doing the opposite of what you're supposed to do. Oh, Starfleet.
Well, man, and there's that the other thing that all these Cardassian episodes share. there are some fantastic dialogue and fantastic script writing, right? Where, Jean-Luc is basically told, Admiral here that, they let the Bajorans live. And he then just goes full Admiral, where he goes, damn it, they're terrorists or something like that. Yeah. And it's just like,
Yep.
I knew he was bad when he had that deep V. Like, what the fuck was that, you guys? My God.
V for victory.
That was J-Lo deep V.
Yeah.
That was Marina Sirtis deep V.
Do we find him a bad admiral or more of a sad admiral?
Bad admiral.
It's a mixture of both.
Kill everybody on that ship. All the
he was willing to kill innocents. He did. Yeah. This is another thing that we were talking about, and what is a theme of Starfleet throughout these episodes, and that is the fact that Starfleet, after Wolf 359, is living in a constant state of fear. They have a fleet that I think is like at 1/3 of its strength now. Officers are dead. They're just like after the Klingon War, in desperate need of ship captains. They cannot, under any circumstances, get into a long conflict again. If that means turning a blind eye to genocide, and not only turning a blind eye, but doing so openly, saying, well, this is against the Prime Directive. This is just them living in fear because they know that they can't do it. So turning a blind eye, Admirals basically looking the other way and saying, yeah, you're our friends, you're our allies, of course we'll support you in this, doesn't make it right. And I think Jean-Luc even says it, like, dude's gonna get court-martialed. What he did was against the law. Like,
I only say sad admiral because, like, I can't believe a guy like him attained the rank of admiral in that, to have been so easily.
He was so Weasley
and manipulated. Like, at the end we find, he is being manipulated in that, consciously, unconsciously in that, but
dipshits everywhere.
Basically to take a disgraced Starfleet officer out of prison, to just disgrace her again, basically, it's just like as low as you can possibly go.
She's a pawn. That's easy for him.
Oh,
burn him.
We're Lauren though. We'll get to her. She comes back later.
Yeah, she's so good. I mean, listen, we know how great Michelle Forbes is, right? Admiral. Speaking of bad admirals, Admiral Kane in Battlestar. Again, Badmiral or misguided.
That whole show is like you could
crazy.
Put all the characters in a line and say which one's good, which one's bad, and you're just like,
I don't know.
I want to believe they're good. Which one's a Cylon? God damn it, Boomer!
Chief, it's in the fracking ship. Sorry. Britt, you have the con as we move on to the growing Federation Cardassian tension, the formation of the Maquis, and readying for war.
Bum, bum, bum.
Oh, sorry. Can I just I'm sorry. Right before you go, I just want to read Talix's comment real quick. On the Cardassians, they are extraordinarily manipulative, which is good for keeping their enemies off balance, which they do for years. So,
yep. They're shady AF, and that's what makes them a good villain. And then sometimes they're not a villain, which makes you feel conflicted as a person in the audience. You're just like, I hate that this person's not doing the wrong thing. I want to hate them, but I can't. So anyway, on to the growing tensions and readying for war. Did you want to say something, Hawk?
I'll save it for you. Go ahead.
Okay. So in 2369, Cardassia had withdrawn from Bajor. But a full treaty with the Federation was a year away from being officially signed. Even with these events happening, as well as the events that took place in The Wounded, Starfleet becomes increasingly convinced that the Cardassians are not only readying for war once again, but experimenting with illegal weapons. This forces Starfleet's hands, and we get the events of Chain of Command, one of the most famous TNG two-parters. Like my background. Let me light up your life, friends. Despite all signs of the evidence of rearming, as well as increased Federation negligence of border colonies in dispute, Starfleet continues to try and work diplomatically with the Cardassians. Jean-Luc's favorite word, diplomacy. While using spies and espionage to try and get more information, as seen in the episodes Lower Decks and Journey's End. How did we feel about Picard's use of Ensign Sito and Wesley's decision.
Before we go to those, I kind of didn't put a question at the end of the part about Chain of Commands parts 1 and 2, but we should talk about those before we talk about
extensively.
And, yeah.
My first question:
Journeys in.
How many lights are there?
There's 6 lights. There's 6 lights. There's
only when he's holding the button.
I'm blinded by the lights.
You're welcome. I'll increase my lights. Acting like Picard. Anyway, sorry, was there a question?
Well, just this. I mean, listen, this episode is something. You
like
were over my house watching it yesterday. Yeah.
One of the greatest 2-parters. I always cry at the end. Like by the time he's yelling, "There are 4 lights," like I'm just like tears streaming down my face, and I'm like, but he looks so confused because he's all 5. Wow, is this a heck of a like? You're used to seeing Picard like usually on his game. Like very few people get the upper hand on him, and to see him so like dehumanized to the point where they're just calling him human and like to be tortured and also to be tricked into all of this when it was something that was so obviously going to be a trap and just like none of them thought about it. He was focused on like Jellicoe's got the ship. We got to do this secretive mission, which by the way, Lower Decks, the animated series. The fact that they used those like suits, I was like, this is the episode's from. I love it. But to see Starfleet literally be like, this is some covert like Section 31 shit you're gonna go do, super shady, because we think they have weapons of mass destruction. What? Metagenic,
yeah.
Anyway. Yes. Oh boy.
Yeah.
Incredible acting, that's all I gotta say. Just across the board.
I mean, David Warner alone, we'll talk about him in length. The biggest thing I want to say is this episode specifically shows just how scared, right? Going along what I've been saying the entire episode, scared Starfleet and the Federation are of getting into another conflict, because they literally task Jean-Luc Picard, the most decorated captain in Starfleet at the time, right, on a suicide mission. That's what it is. They pretty much know he's not coming back.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't give command of the Enterprise to someone you already gave command of the Enterprise to during the Borg invasion, right, in Will of Riker. You bring a captain in who fought in the Cardassian Wars. That's how desperate Starfleet is at this point, which says something, and how scared they are. It's great, right? Like it's a great set piece to basically know that, you know, I brought this up, I think yesterday to Brittany. It's amazing probably watching these episodes live during the 90s. Like the internet wasn't what it was back then, right? Like what people probably thought, oh man, is he going to be the new captain on the show moving forward? Like, is this the end of Patrick Stewart on the show? Like you just didn't know back then. So
there actually seem to be like dire consequences when you're watching it week by week.
Well, yeah, and listen, like Ronnie Cox is a commanding presence as well. Like he's a great actor, so it wouldn't be out of the realm of possibility to like change the leads, 5 seasons, and it happens on television.
Meanwhile, we're worried about fucking Loki for next week. We're just like, oh no, what's gonna happen? But really, people, watching this, we're just like, oh my god, every 7 days.
We were so innocent back then.
Yeah.
Were we?
What I love about this 2-parter is it emphasizes a strong point in what makes the Cardassians great villains. The fact that they didn't have superior technology in that, so they had to rely more on information on that. They did a great job. They picked this one thing that they knew they could find out about Picard, and that to use that to lure him into actually coming to this planet into what was a suicide mission. And obvious, it's a trap.
It's a trap.
Yeah, but always just to gain a dominant position in a bartering negotiation, which this ended up being in that.
Yep.
Will Riker in these episodes, like I know that everybody does an amazing job because the crew is so connected to Picard, and they're all showing Jellicoe like you are literally putting this man's life on the line for this. Like they're all kind of mad, but oh man, Riker's comeback sometimes. I'm just like, fuck yes. Yeah. You are number one for a reason.
Yeah. You are arrogant.
How did Jellicoe get that assignment? Like he's so bad.
He sucks.
He's
it's like even in when I worked at a restaurant as a manager, like that's the kind of manager who is the fucking worst. Like you come into a new place and you don't take a second to look around and see how things work and
but that's
spend
always how
some
new
time.
bosses are.
It's
like,
true.
no, the first day you're like, we're changing everything. Like,
Yep.
Get over yourself, asshole.
They're like, I have a good paycheck. I can do whatever I want.
I have strong like feelings when I see this guy because I'm just like, oh, I've worked for you. Ugh.
I hate how much he yells. Like fucking Yellico. Calm down.
Yellico. I think that as much as we all like to hate Jellicoe, I think that he gets a bad rap because like where he came from, like on his ship, he was probably well respected, right? Like he had a system and that system was established on that ship. Did he go about trying to establish his system way too quickly on board the Federation flagship? Yeah, not great. I also love about this the going to both parts, how it's resolved with Jellicoe, who you would think, right, would be maybe quick to pull the trigger and fire photon torpedoes and ask questions later. No, he actually goes about this in a very strategic way with piloting the shuttle, well, having Riker pilot the shuttle. That, by the way, I won't ask you. I'll pilot the shuttle. You're welcome.
You're welcome.
But place these mines strategically and be like, guess what? You outthought us, but guess what? We just outthought you.
More strategically
really like
than
that.
Beverly did.
Yeah.
What?
Ooh.
Can you believe she fell for the rock shit? You practiced this how many times in the holodeck? She's like,
yeah.
Ensign Row goes, Riker and the crew acted like babies, though, not trying to adapt to the new captain. I disagree.
I disagree too.
I
think their shit worked. Why are you trying to change it?
I see him as a bad captain for the Enterprise, but the right captain for this particular mission, which is essentially why he was brought in. And that, he knew the Cardassians very well, again from the Border Wars, but also, I think it kind of goes back to like, the wounded in that he still had, I think they needed somebody tough in the position who had all those bad feelings about the Kardashians, but could still be professional.
The Kardashians? What about Chloe?
Cardassians?
We need a ding.
Wait, you need one of these? One of these bad boys?
Give me one.
You wanted a ding, right?
Uncompressed.
I didn't hear it.
You didn't hear it?
I heard it.
Oh, okay.
It fades out at the end.
It was a gentle ding. I thought it was going to be more like ding.
Jellicoe, your jello.
I like my dings to have some oomph behind them. Ding.
Gong.
There you go.
Let's talk about Hawk. Did you want to continue?
No, I just say like Starfleet needed a hardliner in that negotiation, and that like he pulled it off.
Yeah. David Warner's Gul Madred as just the nasty Cardassian but playing it very innocent, right? And there he is. David Warner is one of the most underrated actors, I think. Yeah. Of all time. He's so amazing. To hate him in this role. You absolutely
they pick good people to be the Cardassians. Yeah. Like they all have they just have a way about them that's, I think we said nuanced about 100 times this episode, but it's true. It's just there's layers. You don't feel like they're one-dimensional. Dimensional. I say
yeah.
You guys know what I mean.
Sometimes you look at them and you're like, why are you this fucked up? Like, you already know. You're like, I know why you brought Jean-Luc into this room. You're going to torture him. He doesn't know it yet, but I know. And then you're just like, why are you
Because they're fucking space
Nazis? He brings his
Nazis.
kid in.
I was about to say the scene with the kid is brilliant.
The kid scene is so good. Picard.
Yeah. And brutal.
The entire writing of that episode was brilliant.
Yeah. Brilliant.
No, like years later, I found out like you kind of find out more information about like stuff like in torture techniques and that. Like I think the writers, the people who wrote that episode, and that really did their homework and that there was I'm getting a little tongue tied here, but
it's okay.
Yeah. I watched a documentary once on the British and the techniques they'd use on IRA prisoners and that, and there was a lot of similarities in that to what was going on there, and that the control of all the environment, what they saw, what they heard, everything, and that when they hoist them up on the thing, that was a technique the British actually developed in interrogating Irish prisoners, and that they make them stand against walls for hours in these brutal positions. The whole thing with the four lights, which we really have to get into, and that which is just a total psychological mind fuck in that you want the prisoner to come around to your way of thinking. And
well, it's a version of Stockholm syndrome, right? You finally get them to believe what you want them to say, even though it's not what's actually there.
Yeah.
The only thing, my only problem with these episodes is that he just starts singing Sur le Pont d'Avignon. And I'm like, stop trying to make him French. I know he's supposed to be from là-bas, France. But like, nobody in France, has their Sunday night dinner and then like stand around the table and like sing that together. It's like, unless he was remembering something from when he was like 5, but like
Star Trek loves singing. O'Brien did it in that episode.
Oh, that was such a good scene. That was such a good scene.
But his made more sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He was sharing something cultural.
Yeah.
Picard was just laying in a daze and suddenly remembered he was French instead of British, and I was like,
well,
overall, great acting though.
And especially the moment where Picard turns it around on Madrid too, and yeah. Oh, you're a 6-year-old boy. You're scared. You're afraid. He's like, how many lights are there? Oh, 4 lights. Oh,
that was like the tension in that scene, and that the fact that someone being interrogated looks for every opportunity to turn it around on their own interrogator. Patrick Stewart did a very similar role back years ago in that a brief cameo in the BBC's adaptation of Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy. He played Carla,
nice.
the Russian counterintelligence agent against Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Alec Guinness.
Yeah. Alec Guinness. Yeah, Alec Guinness.
I was gonna say he's so young.
Alec Guinness played the British counterintelligence guy in that, and they're in a room together in that. Patrick Stewart says nothing in that. He just lets him do all the talking, and he gains a piece of valuable information which he later uses to screw him down the line.
What's even more amazing about this scene is the moment when Picard gets command of the Enterprise back, does not stop, does not pass go, goes, number one, you have the bridge, and Troy just knows to follow him, right? And he reveals that he was broken. Like, he was about to give in. That close. He believed there were 5 lights. And that was one of the most powerful moments, not only of Patrick Stewart's tenure as Jean-Luc Picard, but I think in all of Star Trek. That moment of fragility, that moment of just complete openness that we don't see from that character very often, was really good.
And you want to believe that he's like, he never gave in, because you're like, oh, he kept fighting like to the end, like he was doing all these different things. But even when he stares at the lights for a long time, you're like, something's wrong. Like, what is he gonna say? And the fact that he yells there are 4 lights, and then it's like, don't touch me, and like leaves the room. But the fact that they end with that, where he's talking to Troy and confides with her, and then he's just like, I really did see 5, and then they just like, ship floats away, and you're just like, gutted.
Where is the Emmy?
Yeah, it's very reminiscent of the scene after he's assimilated and he's back in command, and he's looking out the window, and it just pans away from the window. It's brilliant. SMK says, after being broken, he should have been relieved of command, to which I say to you, dude, it's Star Trek. There's no such thing as trauma. Come on.
Just like the egg, next week's episode where nothing happened.
Yeah. Anyway, Brittany, we talked about Chain of Command, and I believe we were going to talk about Lower Decks and Journey's End. I'm
changing to another background real quick. This one was supposed to be funny because it's like a Jeopardy question where it's like, how many lights are there?
It looks like Who Wants to Be a Millionaire?
4, or that's what it is. Sorry. Yeah, I can't see it on my screen, but maybe you guys can see it. It's like 4.
It's a good one. It's a good.
Oh yeah. So Lower Decks and Journey's End. Do you want me to ask the question again for this?
Yeah. Just because we went off on Chain of Command for a bit.
So we know that Chain of Command started off that sort of spy and espionage thing that didn't go so well. But we see that used also in the episodes of Lower Decks and Journey's End. How did we feel about Picard's use of Ensign Cedo, R.I.P., and Wesley's decision to yeet from Starfleet? It's the most polite way I can say it.
Where did yeet come from, by the way? I've heard it over the last couple of months. I understand
it's just
what it means.
Like it's
What's
like
it from?
it's the slang right now.
Popularity because it was in a video where somebody was walking in the hallway at their school and their friend gave them a can of soda and they realized it was empty, so they said, "This bitch empty, yeet," and they threw it. And then everybody started throwing things and saying yeet.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm glad we have you here because it keeps us relevant.
Yeah,
Yes,
thanks. I
very much
understand
so.
the Gen Z
Hey, I
humor.
say yeet all the goddamn time. Hold up.
Oh, I'm here for saying I just didn't. I was like, where did this come from?
It's like instead of let's get this bread, it's let's eat this wheat.
Yep.
You know.
Ensign
Answer the
Cedo.
question.
Oh, man.
Oh.
This episode, it's interesting, right? Because this isn't like technically a Cardassian episode, but it so is.
It is
because like any other situation, any other officer, I don't even think that Jean-Luc or Starfleet thinks about putting them in that situation. But you have a young ensign who, you know, Giraffe actually made some great points about it when we did the watch along for this. Who's eager to please and listen. Like, there's no love lost with her for the Cardassian. She's Bajoran. So to get a mission which she may not come back from, where she's helping the Federation because she's basically bringing a Cardassian spy back, yeah, of course she's going to accept that mission, which makes it even more tragic. But the fact that Starfleet was like taking these measures, right?
And the fact
Picard
that
manipulated her.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I said this in the chat earlier, but my dad watches with me earlier, and this is the only episode of Star Trek I think he's seen like all the way through because he just sat and watched it with me. And like, I know that you don't see these characters other than in this episode, the lower decks.
You do in
characters,
Ensign Cedo.
Okay, so
Yep.
you do there. But like, you largely don't have a huge connection to them. But even him sitting down and watching it, he by the end of the episode, like, and he knew. He even asked me halfway through the episode because I already know what happens to her because I'd seen it before. But he was just like, "She's gonna die, isn't she?" And I was just like, "I don't know, Dad." I was like, "Normally things get better by the end of a Star Trek episode," and he's like, "They're not going to." Like,
oh, that's not funny,
like,
but it's
he
funny.
knew and he picked on to it, and then when it ended and stuff, he was just like, "That was really sad." And then he went to bed, and I was like,
Oh, no.
I was like, "Sorry, Daddy, did you feel emotions?" I was like actually crying, and like he turned around, he's like, "That was sad," and I was like, "I know, I cry every time," and he was like, "Okay, good night." But damn,
what a great job they did with a lot of characters we've never seen before, giving them enough time that you care about them, and then, you know, when they icebox somebody, you're like, oh, I actually do give a shit. Like, I think that's incredible writing, and just the story itself, you know, it's yeah, feelings, Brittany.
It's like in Harry Potter when you realize that the whole time Dumbledore was raising Harry as a lamb for the slaughter.
Yeah, literally.
By the time you reach the last book and you're like, oh, Dumbledore was not a good person. And then you see, like, you're so used to Picard, you know, being so helpful to the crew as much as, you know, he can be a captain and, you know, say the things that have to be said. But even you're like, wow, he's being a little harsh, you know, and you know it's going to lead somewhere. But
Season 7 Jean-Luc was a very different Jean-Luc. I mean, all things considered.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think it was that season, that show version of TNG was a lot closer to like a show we're watching now, like a Discovery. It feels like a more actualized universe, and you know, there's conflict and hard decisions. So I think that's a really good point, Julian. Good job.
I think it's the Cardassians, and that they have a way of bringing out the worst in every single character in Star Trek we meet.
They kind of give you like a no-win scenario. Like, it's almost like every single time you interact with them, it's a Kobayashi Maru. Where like, you know that there's so many different things you can try to do, but it's like you basically have to just pick like, what is the least of my losses. So they had all those ensigns vying for that position. They could have picked any of them to do it, but they're like, she's Bajoran. She made this mistake in her past. She has these things that she needs to please. And they did offer an out. They said, we're going to offer you this mission. You can say no. You don't have to. It's not a command.
But how could she have said no?
No, she wouldn't have said no.
Her look when she walks in the room and then she realizes the dude's a Cardassian, though, like, that's another one of those moments where, like, we know because the other, you know, the ensigns didn't talk to each other, but in the medical bay, they know the shuttle came in. Like, all these people have bits of information, but she's the one that finally gets it all because she's the one that needs to do it. And you're just like, fuck.
Yeah.
But her on the ship, as soon as she gets the shackles on and she gives him that final look, you're just like, she's literally thinking, did I just make the wrong decision or am I doing the right thing?
No, I didn't get that from her at all. I think that she knew, you know, listen.
Yeah, I know she's prepared to die for it, but like she has that moment where like it's final.
Oh,
like,
it's real, right?
Yeah, that's what I mean.
I think that there's two ways to look at this, right? This is obviously a manipulation by her commanding officer these are the times where things like this were happening, suicide missions, trying to keep the peace, espionage, these things, just that's what was happening. I do think though that if she was to make the decision knowing she was going to die over again, she would make that decision to go every single time because of what's happened to her people. It has nothing to do with the story. I mean, listen, it does, right? Because she did fuck up in the past and she wanted to kind of atone for that. But this also has to do with being a Bajoran and being part of a civilization that has been almost brought to extinction, and their culture just being decimated. So she would make that decision over and over and over again. And I want to ask this question to you guys from Jay and see what your thought is, because I don't agree with it, but I want to get your take. I think the admiral who signed off on the order knowing that it was a suicide mission should have been well, Jay, are you talking about chain of command, or are you talking about lower decks, because that's a different situation? Should have been court-martialed. Either way, I wouldn't agree that
I think that's a very tough question, because I think that I think that happens in real life all the time. Like, I think that you go on a mission and you don't know that sometimes you don't know if you're going to come back. I think that you get court-martialed if the mission is illegal. If what you're asking someone to do is outside of what they should be doing. If they're doing what they're supposed to do and it's the right thing to do, then you sent them on a mission and they died, and that's terrible, but that's
and they didn't
happened.
Force her, so that's the thing. That's the red tape.
They gave her every condition. They knew exactly, they told her exactly what she was getting into.
Yeah, their only objective was getting him back into Cardassian space, and that so he could keep feeding them information back to the Federation. That I remember this came up. Remember that movie, The Imitation Game?
Yes, great movie.
Yeah, right. Remember after they get the first message decoded and that, and they figure out that there's going to be this huge attack, that's going to kill thousands of British troops and that, but they can't say a word about it, because as soon as they do, the Nazis will the Nazis will know that they can decode their messages and change up everything.
As far as Wesley's decision to warn the people of the planet, who we're basically, the indigenous people of, America as we know it, who've colonized space now, that, the Federation was yet again conceding another planet to the Cardassians. That's, I think, both because I think a lot of Starfleet officers and cadets, I'm sure, had their own opinions on what was happening with the Cardassians. Some of them acted and joined the Maquis. Some of them just disobeyed orders, like Wesley does in this episode. If Wesley didn't go with the Traveler, would he have joined the Maquis? Yeah, I think he might have, actually. But that's not
he was at a point in his life where
he could have been on Voyager.
Right?
Yeah.
But he was at that point in his life. He did, it's like he had worked so hard in that, for to get through Starfleet, and his career was all mapped out for him by a lot of other people. And then he got to that point where he was like, I don't want to do this anymore. He would have been kind of at that perfect point to be like initiated into the Maquis.
Yeah.
I love this idea.
I like Wesley as a character because he always represents like that younger voice in the crew, and it's always that like the younger generations they'll always question what the generation before them did, and that's
Brittany,
just
you look like you don't have an arm.
I know. I saw that.
SMK. It's pronounced Maquis. It's not Maquis. It's Maquis.
Maquis.
It's the Maquis.
I'll explain my background. It's Picard with his arm like this, and it says, "Who needs phasers when you got guns like this?" What was I saying though?
Sorry, I just saw your floating arm and I couldn't not say anything.
Yeah, sorry. It's like clipping in and out. But like I know that, Wesley has moments where, you can find him irritating or whatever because of that's why they wrote him that way, etc. But like the fact that he makes the decision to tell these people, and it's not even something like Picard from the beginning was like, this is wrong that we're doing this to these people. So many people along the way said the same thing. But Wesley is actually the one who sees this happening and is like, I'm going to tell him. I know that it didn't help the situation and it makes things worse. But even watching that, I'm like, I would have done what Wesley did.
Oh, 100%.
So many of us will watch that and understand. And like, he just shows that he's this younger voice. He's coming into his own. He's like becoming an adult, reaching that age where you can then influence things in the world. You can begin to vote. You can do these things. So like that parallel to people that age that were watching the show, even though all these horrible things were happening, or they're referencing the Cold War and all these things that, you know, they didn't have a choice in, they're like, this is what you can do. And it's not saying that what he does is right or wrong, or it helped or did not, but I really like that he makes that decision, and then he leaves with the Traveler to go do something because he's not meant for this. And I'm just like, is it weird that he just kind of like leaves with this random alien dude?
Speaking of yeeting.
Yeah. But at the same time, it's really cool when time stops and he's just like, cool, you were going to call out this bad situation, but you know what? They'll handle their own problems. You got better shit to do.
Yeah, at this... Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Hawk.
Isn't it a weird contradiction, like, in comparison, that young Wesley actually does the right thing in this situation, whereas Picard was ready to, just follow orders and, basically mass transport these people, insurrection style onto some holoship, I guess.
Picard's... It's like the frog in the boiling water. If you slowly warm it up, they don't know they're gonna die. I think that's sort of, Picard and everyone, they've been slowly, led into this thing where it's like you said, Julian, like transgression after transgression. Like, and they're almost used to it, and so they can't even see, they know it's wrong, but they're still like, well, okay. Whereas, like you say, Hawk and Brittany, Wesley is young and he's able to just be like, no, it's fucked up. Like, no.
Yeah. I what I was going to say, one, is that Picard took so many different stances during this whole, non-conflict with the Maquis, not the Maquis, I'm sorry, with the Cardassians. Sometimes he kind of went the way of good, and sometimes he turned a blind eye, like the episode we're going to talk about next. I just want to say that even though I don't, it's hard to say whether Wesley would have joined the Maquis. I think it would have been a very interesting choice had this not been the 7th season, if we knew the show was going to continue, or maybe he wanted to be on DS9. Seeing a character that is near and dear to our hearts be on the other side of this and be in the Maquis, that would have been very interesting. It's something I would have liked to see, because what he did was something that the Maquis would do, right? Like, they would have interfered in that situation, and I find that very interesting.
And Picard even said there's so many people in Starfleet that sympathize.
Yeah.
And he's like, but the time for sympathy isn't now. Like, even he knows if he was outside of Starfleet, if he was, a third party, he'd probably join the Maquis and do the same shit. Like, but the thing is, he is Starfleet. That's always going to be his thing.
But a lot of, and which is funny you say that, right, Brittany? Because like so many people in Starfleet were like, I am Starfleet, and what Starfleet is doing is wrong, and us creating and joining the Maquis is keeping in line with actual Starfleet ideals. It's a very interesting, like, fine line.
Well, it's like when they say, you're always making concessions, or like, someone who doesn't have best interests in heart will say, meet me in the middle. They move back and you move to meet in the middle, but you're always moving back. And that's exactly what the Cardassians keep doing to Starfleet. They agree to meet them in the middle, but they're slowly getting further and further away from what Starfleet actually stands for, or it's supposed to be doing. It's deep shit, man. Deep Space Nine. Let's go.
Yeah.
I guess that's it for those questions, right?
Yep.
Did anybody not answer? I wanted to make sure everybody answered. Sometimes I get my ADHD kicks in, and I apologize. So, with the Federation and Starfleet refusing to act despite the increased evidence that the Cardassians were, 1, rearming, and 2, leaving their citizens to die or be mistreated by the Cardassians on former Federation colonies now under Cardassian jurisdiction, the Maquis were formed. A resistance group comprised of Federation-born colonists and Starfleet officers fed up with the organization's lack of action. While labeled terrorists and traitors by both the Federation and Cardassians, more and more officers were abandoning Starfleet to join the cause, as is shown in the episode Preemptive Strike, which once again features our very favorite and now Lieutenant Ro Lauren.
Ro's back.
Ro.
Back.
Rose before hose, that's what I say.
She got the upgrade to the new nose, which I appreciated.
Yes.
Man, it's such a good episode. I mean, there's some weird stuff in it too. Like I really like the scene where she and Picard are like in the bar being like creepy close.
Yes.
I feel like that's, but I think it makes sense. And I think sometimes in Star Trek, they do these like weird things where people go to the side and have a conversation and no one looks at them. Like that's weird. So at least they tried. But it's nice to see her. I like that they show her coming back to the ship and everyone is excited to see her, and even though she's not always comfortable with that attention, that she does appreciate it and she does care about that crew, because in the first episode she's super, up against the wall with everybody, and Guinan's the one who helps bring her in.
I love Guinan in that episode.
But oh my god, she's amazing. But
Yeah.
it's an episode, about like choosing sides, and I think that for someone who works so hard to build her life again in Starfleet, and she has to make this choice, and she makes the choice to do what she thinks is right, but that would be such a difficult choice. She's come a long way, and even if you're doing what's right, I think that's doing what's right isn't always what's easy.
Oh, but there was so many confluences of events in that episode, and that it really laid her path out for her, and that, having to relive the whole thing with her father in this, in the with the new guy in the Maquis and that who he befriended, and seeing that whole tragedy played out once again at the hands of the Cardassians and that. So yeah, it's like it's not that there was a right or wrong choice in that. It seemed like that was her only choice in that episode.
Would you say it's been a long row getting from there to here?
Getting her from there.
I think SMK actually may have made that pun in the chat earlier.
Oh, really?
It's well done.
Oh.
Yeah.
I didn't see
This episode, you knew right from the beginning what Row was going to end up doing. You can't be a Bajoran, Starfleet, whatever, and go undercover the way that she goes undercover, experience what she experienced, and not join the Maquis. Would any of us not have made the same exact decision? Right?
I didn't though. The first time I saw it, like I didn't know, because we were young.
Okay.
Like this came out a long time ago.
Yeah.
But I think that it was such a good. It made me think. I was little, and it was like, whoa. So, but I think you're right. Like I think we would all hopefully do the right thing.
It's a fine line, right? Because some of the tactics the Maquis we use later, especially during DS9, are not great, considered acts of terrorism if you want to go that far. Like Eddington is not a very good dude, Jay was mentioning him. There were definitely certain levels of Maquis members, and like I think Row even says it, like some cells are different, some cells are more extreme. Seska, yeah. Well, Seska was a Cardassian, right? Like,
yeah, but they talked about. Oh, there was that other guy. Remember who murdered somebody on Voyager? Just because he was the Betazoid guy, half Betazoid.
Yeah.
The one Brad Dorff played.
Yes.
He joined the Maquis because he liked cutting people up.
Yep.
He was a killer.
I mean,
yeah.
Yep.
They needed someone to cut people up.
Yeah, gotta have
They're
one of
like
those.
just the Cardassians, and he's like, yeah, whatever, sign the paper.
Yeah.
But everything happened in that in this episode, to really push her along, along that goal, and that it's like they needed medical supplies, and that's another thing, and that it's like the Federation kind of dropped the ball on, and that it's like all the people displaced in this conflict, and that we don't have the proper medical supplies, and so like her first task with the Maquis was getting medical gear, and that it's like how how bad could these people be?
Well, and that's the thing, right? Like the Federation literally is turning a blind eye to these colonies who are still Federation citizens, whether they did make the choice to stay on these planets or not, right? Like, why should you be forced to leave your home over silly, stupid border disputes, right? Like, I mean, listen, we're going through some of that in our own world right now. It's insane, and the decision she makes is the right decision. And I mean, look at the tactics that the Cardassians use in this episode, right? Like infiltrating one of their cells, and
shady shit.
It reminds me of Battlestar Galactica a little bit, where they had when they were occupied on New Caprica.
Yes.
And people, some people decided to join the resistance. Some people blew themselves up, and
suicide bombers. Yep.
Yeah, and you have to look at like. And at the time, that was like at the height of, the Iraq war. And, we're told suicide bombers are bad, but then we have a guy like who is supposed to be a hero who's doing it. And it makes you really think of how messy these things are.
Jammer.
Jammer.
And
Duck.
Even in her first episode, the fact that
Jammer was a traitor. Sorry, Brittany.
Yeah,
the fact that literally like the Bajoran man that they were talking to, the leader of that specific community, was just like talking about, we don't even have blankets. And then, of course, Picard and them think, oh, yes, let's get them these things, these things, these things. Like, Ro is standing there, and she's like, yeah, like, they don't have these things. This is the reason why I left. This is why I'm in Starfleet. Like, because I couldn't deal with living here after everything that happened. And as much as she grows, like, from that episode into this one, you see how, they comment on it right away. Picard's like, it's amazing that, like, you're part of that program now. And she's like, thank you for, getting me in that. And how far she's redeemed herself, and the fact that he says the Federation is offering you this specific, like, mission because they trust you to that extent. Like, that shows how amazingly you did. But, like, there's always going to be that part of you that, like, she's the same person as in that first episode. Like, she can't turn a blind eye to these things the way that the Federation can, as much as she is somebody in the Federation. So because she is Bajoran and because she has lived these things, she's seen, quote, her father tortured in front of her
to death.
She's seen atrocities. She's seen post-war what is still happening in these communities. So, like Julian said, what she's going to do before she even does it. And it's just all that more powerful when she's someone that you wish would stay with Starfleet because you want to see her more. But at the same time, you're like, I know we have to let you go because you're going to do what you have to do, the right thing with the Maquis.
And that's the other thing I want to talk about with this episode. My favorite moment of this episode is the very end, right? When she turns to Will and is like, I'm going with them. I'm telling them it's a trap. And Will, like, at the very first glance, looks shocked, but then it's like she's talking to him. He could have tried to overpower her, right? But he didn't.
He got it.
He got it. He knew that what she felt was the right thing was important to her, and he very much let her go. Because again, we didn't talk about him because it's going to show up definitely in a DS9 episode we watched. Thomas Riker, his twin, his identical self, basically is a Maquis officer, right? Like, he joined the Maquis. So it's suffice to say, right? Like, if Thomas Riker joined the Maquis, you have to think that Will Riker has sympathies with the Maquis, because he very much let her go and understood. And I really love that moment.
And that's why Will Riker would be the best captain ever. What?
5, 6, 7, 8. Oh, the jazz.
I love the jazz.
We could keep going on and on about the Cardassians. And the one thing I want to say,
classical? No, jazz.
No, I think you're a bad captain. The one thing I want to say before we close out the episode is this seems a bit more than just a Cardassian episode, right? Like, this is we've ended up talking a lot about the Federation and Starfleet and the Maquis and the Bajorans, but what's unique about the Cardassians more than any other of the species that we've talked to is that they are intertwined with so many different aspects of Star Trek. They're intertwined with the Bajorans. They're intertwined with the Federation. They're intertwined with the Dominion. They're even intertwined with the Klingons. Like, they, I think, are just such an integral part of this universe that we can't just talk about them by themselves. And we're going to be talking about them a lot more in a few weeks when we head over to DS9. Why?
Because they're intertwined with the space station.
Yes, they are.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, Hawk has run off for a second, and it looks like one of our other podcast
members has something to say.
Yeah, it's just perfectly lined up with the microphone, like he's gonna speak.
Yeah. Hello. So that is going to do it for part 1 of our Cardassian episode. I think it's going to get a whole lot deeper and darker as we head into Deep Space Nine. Yeah. Oh, yeah. More terrorism, more freedom fighting.
A lot more crying about Kira Nerys.
We have not even talked about Gul Dukat yet. We didn't even mention Gul Maset, who's his
we
cousin.
did mention Seska.
We did mention Seska. So yeah, so that's going to do it for this episode. I'm thinking the way I see it in my head right now is that we'll do our second part of the Cardassian episode as our last episode before Lower Decks comes back on. So that's August 12th. So look for that continuation. Then that'll do it for this episode of the pod. And I will say, for Hawk, for Brittany, for Aaron, I am Julian. Live long and prosper, Majram. Good night.
Thanks for beaming into our podcast today. If you want to keep the hailing frequencies open, you can subscribe on Apple and Google Podcasts, YouTube, and Spotify. Like what you hear? Put in a good word with Starfleet and leave us a 5-star review.